Kevin, the one thing I miss most in COVID is going into your building, and I've been forced to teach from home and do it. But can you just? That's a significant gift. What does Berkeley mean to you? Why have you done it? Share with the community what drives you to be such a friend of Berkeley and make a gift like this.
Well, Steve, it's a pleasure being here, and again, Dean Harrison and Tenny, thank you so much for today. Berkeley just means so much to me. So there's a confluence of factors, and I've shared these stories in kind of different formats, but I'll try to pull it all together today. The first is that when I between the time I was accepted to Berkeley to the time that I was choosing and enrolling, my father was laid off from his job of, I think, something like 15 years. And we had no idea how, we had no idea how we would even pay for college. And so, there was a whole sequence of talking to the administration at Berkeley, and I knew I wanted to go to Cal. And I met somebody in the financial aid hall at Sproul that helped me navigate, this arcane financial, aid process. And so, I was able, this person redid my financial aid, and I always remember that as, here I was trying to go to a state, school, and I was a California resident, so I was already at the, it was already quite an affordable education, especially back in the 1990s, late 90s. And but I just remember just feeling like so much gratitude towards this opportunity to attend a world-class institution and be able to solve this problem that my family, we had no idea how we paid for college, and to have the aid come through just lifted so much stress off of my family. And I always thought, I'm going to repay this debt whenever I can. And then I think, Cal also, so that was kind of, even before I got to Cal. And then my transfer, I would say Cal was a huge transformation in my life. I grew up in a small town of 10,000 people. My parents were immigrants, and we lived in this small town, and it wasn't a very exciting town. It was, everyone in the town was excited when we got our first, Starbucks. That was like the biggest excitement in our town in the decade. And, I went from that to a very particular type of community to this incredibly diverse community at Cal. It just opened my eyes and perspective to so many different aspects of my life. And I think a lot of, what's led me to kind of what I'm doing today has really, the roots of it point back to Cal. And certainly the gifts that were given to me at Cal. I've always believed in, making sure that, we're all here standing on the shoulders of other folks who made philanthropic gifts to build fantastic institutions like Cal, and that whether it's time or energy or capital resources, we got to do what we can to support the communities that we love and believe in. So I think all of those things kind of came together, and I was fortunate to have sold, Kabam, and so it was just in a really fortunate time to really start thinking about in my life what mattered and what I wanted to support. So that was that's kind of the brief background there.
Thank you, Kevin. Thanks to you and Connie. So many people are going to be able to benefit from your time, efforts, and resources. It feels like yesterday we were having lunch at Kabam. You sold that, you start Forte, you do Gen.G, then Rally. Can I now call you serial entrepreneur? What drives you to keep going like this? And what is it like to be a serial entrepreneur?
I love it. It sounds crazy, and actually it probably is crazy. I actually remember, I was starting Forte, and it was my third company, and I had it was. Kabam was this nice success, and for those in the gaming industry and kind of some of the investors around Silicon Valley that have been looking at gaming companies for a long time, they sort of tracked this company. And so it was relatively easy for me to get a lot of, to go to a lot of different folks and talk about this idea of like starting a new crypto company 3+ years ago when crypto was just starting to come onto the radar, but was still this really weird thing. I remember actually the board member, Alex Rampell from Andreessen Horowitz, who eventually invested. He said, "Kevin, you're doing this weird thing. How are you starting so many companies? We've met serial entrepreneurs and we love serial entrepreneurs, but the fact that you're starting them so fast, how are you doing that? And what you're thinking behind this?" And I've just thought through my life where I'm now getting very much to the point where I love building new things. And I really love the 0 to 1 process of building a company. And for whatever reason, I'm sort of making it work, which is I love, I sort of build the business plan, I build the team, I put the capital together, and I get the first product to market in a way that there's clear product market fit. And then I kind of try to move myself into a chairman role or in a board member role, stay active with the company, but really install a new CEO and team that's set up for success and let them take it, kind of take the ball forward. And so I've discovered I just really love building new teams and the 0 to 1 phase of a company, and especially if we really think about kind of my career, being on the bleeding edge of kind of the technology frontier, where it's not clear what's happening. What I really love is I love a new technology and a new business model that is enabled through that technology. And so my very first company, I didn't think about it this way, but Kabam was kind of at this forefront of gaming and cloud computing. It was really, and it wasn't even called cloud computing, back then. But we started Kabam before even AWS was a business yet. And we were trying to build games that lived on a server, and then players would connect into the server to play the game, as opposed to buying the DVD from Best Buy or Walmart and putting it into a PlayStation. And so it was a very different sort of technology model of how do you build a game and deliver it to a consumer audience that obviously has kind of the benefits of serving a worldwide audience. But it was this new way of doing business. New technology enabled a new business model, and everything changed because of that. And I just find loving those types of intersections of new technology, new business model, new team, taking it from 0 to 1, figuring out the really hard amorphous parts of it, and then trying to get a new team to take it on. So that's worked for me in my career, and I'm just at the stage where I'm really trying to formalize what that structure looks like. And as you noted, my resume sounds weird because there's just all these things. And it is certainly a serial entrepreneurship, but I'm sort of doing them somewhat in parallel.
Yeah, it sounds like your job description is set strategy, find market opportunity, hire people, raise money. Those are the three. This is what Be Like Kevin. This is what I do across these businesses. When you look back to Cal, your banking career, your venture capital career, there's a lot of people watching that want to be like Chou, right? And so take us through a couple of moments. Where did this skill base come, and just this ability to reflect and say, okay, I'm going to be the strategy professional, I'm going to be the fundraiser, I'm going to find the right people. Where did these skills come from?
That's right. I think, Steve, you and I had a brief conversation about this, but I'm an introvert. So number one, I remember being scared in your class that you would call on me, and I would be a deer in headlights in terms of, really, not knowing the answer and so forth. And so, and that was a lot of my, again, I point to a lot of things at Cal that just really pushed me, made me uncomfortable. I think a lot of Cal students just have a ton of grit and resilience coming through, the program. So anyway, I give a lot of credit to that. I honestly don't know, I grew up in a very small town. I lived in the same house for 18 years. So it's not like grew up with a lot of change and, you know, I think I just always, I love learning new things, and I have no, probably the biggest thing is I have no, I, I love anticipating something new, and I've always been, since I was a little kid, I always loved reading sci-fi, for example, and reading the Bradburys and Asimovs and, you know, just all the different, ideas from great thinkers about what could be possible, you know, in the world and in the future. And I love, you know, part of me like lives in my own head. And so I think and then at some point I realized to bring to life the ideas in my own head, I needed to figure out all these skills that you're talking about. I needed to not just figure out the vision and the strategy, but I needed to make sure I could put together a team and the capital and any other resources that would be required to actually turn the idea into reality. And I think sort of, I would say maybe the first 20 years of my life was really, you know, spent daydreaming about a lot of great ideas. And, you know, Berkeley was sort of this catalyst of, okay, you can daydream about these things, but they'll never be reality until you put in the work and figure out all the hard things to turn them into reality. And in the last 20 years of my life has really been figuring that skill out and honing it. And you know, I don't know exactly where things will go from here. It's sort of, you know, there's with technology, you know, we're just now, and probably it's only been the last 10 years or so, and there's obviously much greater serial or parallel entrepreneurs than myself, you know, out there with Elon obviously doing some amazing things and Dorsey and plenty of others. But I think it's really the technology today that allows certain people to say, you know, I'm going to try to do multiple companies. And that would have been just a crazy idea 20 years ago. It just wouldn't even have been possible because you couldn't physically, you know, be in so many different places. But the opportunity today using digital technologies to work with teams all over the world on very different missions and different products is a little bit more possible. So we're just kind of scratching this. Again, technology is enabling something new. And so this idea of kind of running or starting multiple companies instead of completely serially, but in some ways concurrently, is only a relatively recent phenomenon that's happened.
Good. Just so we're clear, I have you ranked ahead of Elon. The only thing he does better than you is he can tweet a little better than you. We'll get your tweeting skills up, and you'll give him a run for his money. Cryptocurrency. We have some people on the Zoom that think it's a bad rumor from Reddit, and we have some people that eat, sleep, and drink it and know it's the way of the future. Can you take it through for the novice, and then take it through for the advanced? Well, where's crypto going? Why is it important? And after that, we'll transition to the intersection of gaming and crypto. But maybe you can just help the audience with crypto, because you clearly understand it.
Yeah, that's a great question, Steve. So there's, I remember actually when I was a freshman at Cal, I entered in '98. And I remember thinking about the .com craze that was going on at the time. And I was like, man, this just sounds, all these ideas sound stupid. Yeah, I remember seeing there was some business, it was in the news, some business was, I just raised a bunch of money for selling, you know, what was it, for caskets, you know, for dead people. They were selling them online, and I raised a bunch of money. I was like, that's just, I don't understand how that's going to be a good business. And then there's another business I was trying to do, you know, called Webvan, that had, you know, raised $1 billion and was trying to deliver groceries online. And I was like, you know, everyone was like, this is stupid. This is not going to work. And then when it failed, in Webvan's case, actually what's now happened, of course, is that there's, you know, between DoorDash and a few others, Uber Eats and others, it's actually a great business. It's an incredible need. And I think, but I remember being back at the very beginning of the internet. And of course, I was just a freshman at that point, just thinking, I don't understand all these really stupid ideas, and people, you know, all the headlines about the massive sums that people were making, and and just not getting it at the time. But of course, the fundamentals of what was happening with the internet back then led to the Amazons, led to the Googles, led to just a number of incredible companies, incredible technologies, incredible business models that were developed off of this technology. But there was a lot of really bad, like a lot of chaff in the air, a lot of stuff that you had to figure out, like that wasn't real. That was sort of use the right buzzwords, use the right concepts, but didn't sort of pull it together and build something new with it, based off this incredible promise of what the internet enable. And I think that's in parallel to what's happening today with crypto. There's a lot of snake oil and chaff and folks doing weird things. And I encourage everyone to really think, and then on the other side, because of the internet, frankly, there's incredible thinkers and incredible content about what this technology enables, and folks like Vitalik Buterin from Ethereum, and others that just creating world-changing type of ideas and pulling it together in a very coherent way to sort of understand crypto. So there's two things I always recommend for people who are relatively new to crypto. One is to read the Bitcoin white paper. It's actually not that daunting, and it doesn't, it's I think it's something like 8 pages, and it's actually 5 or 6 of them are relatively easy to read. And then the second is to follow Vitalik in the space, because he is just such an incredible thinker. And if you really want to understand what crypto is about, following somebody like Vitalik on Medium, I think it's Medium where he posts now, that is just an incredible thinker in the space. So what crypto ultimately is it is a public database. It's a relatively simple thing of ultimately what it is. It just means that instead of a database being owned by a government, being owned by a bank, being owned by a group of people, a for-profit business, or even a nonprofit business, it is a public database. And it's really a public good. I think a lot of what people would say about Bitcoin and Ethereum is it's a public good, the same way that you would think about a public park or water as a resource, or air as a resource. There's a lot of thinking about these things being open source and being a public good as kind of one of the foundations. And there's a lot. So number one, there's a lot of hard technology to make something a public good that anybody can write to, and is secure. And that you can't have a bunch of bad actors rewriting that database and saying, actually, no, Steve Etter doesn't own 10 Bitcoin. You only I'm going to take those 10 Bitcoin and put it into my account. So there's a lot of really hard cryptographic, between cryptography, consensus between any machine in the world that can run this software, and what happens if a bunch of bad machines get together and try to, or bad actors get together to try to go steal everyone else's, all the good people's money, or Bitcoins, for example, or Ethereum coins. So that's all it is. There's a lot of hard stuff and technology that go behind being a public database that anybody can write to or participate on. And that database facilitates transactions between any parties in the world, directly between two parties in the world, without having to move through an intermediary. And that's a basis of what blockchain technology. That term is somewhat used interchangeably with crypto as kind of the technology that secures this type of database. And then, so that was the original invention of Bitcoin, and just understanding that it's just a public database is what Bitcoin kind of represents. And then Ethereum really created, which is not as much in the headlines today, what they've created is something called a smart contract, or the ability to write a very relatively, write programs or applications logic that says, hey, Steve, you and I go into a transaction together, but it's not just, Bitcoin says, hey, I can send you 1 Bitcoin and for my 10 Bitcoins, and that it's all in a public database. What a smart contract says is, if for example, if the price of Bitcoin itself goes above a certain number, I will send you 1 Bitcoin, right? So creating a very simple sort of contract that in that particular case, for example. And that's what Ethereum that was the promise of Ethereum, was to take the database, and instead of a very primitive way of putting things into that database, enable programming logic to move things around in that database, but still being publicly verifiable by anybody in the world. And that's what Ethereum enabled. And that was really where I think folks like me and others said, this is going to change the world. Like Bitcoin's already, and it's already continued to, it's headline thrust throughout the rest of the world, and people just starting to learn and think about it. But Ethereum is going to, I think for a lot of practitioners, the ability to write programming logic onto a public database that anybody in the world can run a node for and participate in hosting that database is really what's led to Rally and Forte and an explosion of other companies and crypto projects that are just getting started right now. So I feel like we're kind of in the second or third inning of what crypto is. Right now we're not in the very, very beginning. Although sometimes you read the headlines and you're like, what is Bitcoin? It's snake oil. It's it's rat poison squared. It's whatever some folks would say about it. But when you sort of really look at it from a technology perspective, and again, going back to, I started with the internet in the 90s, what was so great about the internet was that you had this defined protocol that anybody in the world could create a website, use HTTP, use TCP/IP, and create something on the internet for anybody else in the world to look at and interact with, right? And what we're talking about with blockchain is that same underlying technology. If anybody in the world can host a Bitcoin, you could be a Bitcoin miner, right? You go out there and you go buy a little bit of hardware, you put the software into it, you are now a Bitcoin miner. Or in Ethereum's case, you do the same thing with Ethereum, and now you're an Ethereum validator, so that you can validate all these smart contracts from any person in the world, and then this all just works. And there's nobody that controls it, no company that controls it, no government, and anybody can participate. And so really, I think what happened with the internet was that we quickly went from this incredibly decentralized way of doing things to, it was really hard. And so AOL and then Yahoo and then Google and Facebook and plenty of others sort of created these walled gardens that centralized a lot of things. And crypto, one of the really interesting things about crypto is that it's, I think, swinging the pendulum back, where it's going back to a lot of some of the formative internet protocol days of creating these really decentralized technologies. And I think that's another area of excitement. And if the explosion of the internet and what was possible took 15 years or even really 20 years to still continue today to figure out new applications for it, I think we're in somewhat of that cycle with crypto today.
How does Rally fit in, Kevin? What's Rally's mission, and how does crypto and gaming fit it, and how have they converged all in one space? Two of your key core competencies, technical core competencies.
Yeah, so this idea of creating a public ledger, and then having the core platform decentralized. So one of the things that's been well studied in Silicon Valley and in other technology platforms over the last couple of decades is what drives incredible network effects and what drives a platform's dominance in a particular category. And starting with AT&T, but then moving to Microsoft, moving to more lately, thinking about social networks, payment systems, e-commerce, with Amazon. But it's really it's kind of a fascinating study, and I'm sure some of that has been done by fantastic researchers at Cal and Haas. Is just what makes certain platforms so incredibly dominant in some very particular categories. And network effects are one of the most important data network things that drive network effects, data advantages, technical compatibility advantages. There's a number of different things that sort of have driven network effects. And what happens is you obviously create an incredibly valuable company that creates a lot of good for the world. If a company like Facebook or Microsoft or others, dominate this category and everyone uses that technology, it creates a lot of interoperability and potential for innovation because you have a standard platform. But arguably, what's starting to happen, between Spotify and Epic Games, trying to go to court to settle their differences with Apple, for example, competing against them or making it unfair. And that you develop these incredible platforms, and then the platform company can end up competing either intentionally or unintentionally with its own ecosystem. And I think a lot of having been building games for 11 years, I've seen the way that the gaming industry and content creators and publishers ultimately have a really interesting somewhat competitive relationship with the core platforms that we build on. And there's always a feeling, one of the core tenets in the game industry is never be dependent on one platform, because that platform will always change, and it won't necessarily be, there's just too much risk to put your entire business onto one platform. And of course you take that so between Nintendo and Sony PlayStation and Microsoft, Xbox, to the world of digital of Google, Apple, Facebook, there's always been this kind of feeling in the gaming industry. You got to work with everyone. You got to put your content everywhere, because otherwise the rules of any one platform can change in a way that just crushes your business if you're not careful about it. And we saw this in the Facebook gaming era, where a number of the really promising venture-funded gaming companies got crushed when Facebook changed its platform, and only the biggest ones like Zynga and Kabam and a few others, made it out the other side. And so all of that is to say that when I think about a few categories, so my excitement with crypto and this truly building for a decentralized platform is number one, I was so excited to build on Ethereum, because I thought, I've been building on Facebook and Apple and Google and a few other platforms for 11 years in the past. And it was always challenging to build on these corporate-owned platforms, and things would just change all the time. And for anybody who's been involved in a business that has an app that's submitted to the App Store or the Play Store, or worked with Facebook, you probably know just the constant change and just this incredible tax of just building your business on these platforms. That is hard. You get a lot of benefits from it, but it's also incredibly hard. And so I was so incredibly excited to build on Ethereum, because this idea that Ethereum was not a company. It was that it would never, because it was trying to go through, if it was trying to meet a quarter's growth goals, or meet, trying to go public at some point, they're changing the fees, they're changing the rules. Ethereum would never do that, because there's no company that even runs it. And so the opportunity to build on something like that felt like building on the core internet again. And then I thought, okay, what are some of the more powerful ways that you can do that? Well, of course, I start with gaming and say, if we can build a new gaming development platform that game publishers can build their games onto, and we would build it in a decentralized way, such that as a platform, if we ever got to be larger and larger, and we get the inevitable questions from our game developers and publishers about, why should I build with you guys? Why am I not building on 2 other platforms, so that I can de-risk myself whenever you change the rules on me? That we can look them in the eye and say, look, this is open source platform technology. You can build on it. We will never be able to change the rules on you, because of the way that we're architecting the core technology. You can inspect the code yourself and look at it, and trust that we can't. You don't have to trust me and what we're telling you. You can get your CTO to look at the code and be like, and understand the promises that we're making to you that are committed into code. It's just an incredibly powerful, business rationale to go to a business and say, you can build on our platform without us worrying about it because you can look at the code yourself. And then I think the other category that I was really interested in was social. I think we're getting to it's, to me, it's incredible that just earlier this year, we had, companies in the world headed by a singular CEO that ultimately censored POTUS. And, and there's great reasons for, wherever you are. And I, of course, know the general leanings of political things. And it's sort of, a lot of fantastic reasons, but we're sort of in a world where there's a very small number of people and platforms that can control a lot of the social the social channels for communication today. And I think that is it's incredible to me that a CEO can have that type of power running a social platform. And so I think there's an incredible need in the world to make sure that we have other decentralized social alternatives to the centralized ones out there, so that there's more choice, there's more ability for new types of businesses to be built that can offer more freedom of speech and different perspectives. And so I think it's just one of the things that in the political aspect, I think is just a sliver of it. There's a lot of, just in general, if you're trying to make your living as a YouTube creator, which happens to pull, as I think these days, there's a pretty famous survey that was done among teenagers of like, what do you aspire to be, growing up? And the number one answer was, I hope to be a professional YouTuber. And we live in this world where being, YouTube famous or TikTok, being a creator, and some of the earning potential of being a top 1% YouTuber is pretty incredible. But what about the middle class? What about the rest of the people who are trying to create content? And I think creating a way, kind of different types of social platforms where more people have an opportunity to make a living and earn and monetize their content and creations. And not having that be, again, dependent on a very small number of centralized platforms that are using advertising primarily as their business model. And because that's their primary business model, their share of that to the people who are creating content, is pretty limited. Right? Look at, if you're creating content on Twitter, how much do you make by creating content on Twitter? You get 0%, even though you as the audience are fueling all of the activity of that platform. And platforms like YouTube and a few others do actually share more of it with you, but they still take the lion's share of it, and then you get a small piece of it. And so I think there's just a lot of really interesting ways if we really get to, at least my perspective, and there's a segment of us in crypto that look at this technology as a way to really equalize the field, build the next major tech platforms, but do it in a decentralized way, where we're not, my job is not to be the CEO of this thing for the next 20 years, but it's really meant to be an open source network over time that runs like Bitcoin or Ethereum today, with no company and no CEO of that company that sits at the nexus of all decisions in that network. That, I think, is the promise of what crypto is today. And imagine a Facebook that runs like Bitcoin. Imagine imagine an Amazon, imagine Apple, Google, et cetera, that run like Bitcoin today or Ethereum today without a CEO in charge. I think that is an incredible sort of potential for the world that as an alternative that is, I think, necessary for the world today.
Kevin, that's unbelievable. It's very admirable. It's great that it's great you're from Berkeley. It's great you're out putting to work for all of us. In that train of thought, my one pet peeve sitting out in the audience is the Steve Etter talks too much. Let's get, the audience is blowing up the Q&A board, and let's get me, I got a bunch of questions, but let's get the audience, one came here to see you and ask their own questions. Tenny, do you want to run us through the questions. It's just blowing the board up.
Yes, happy to do so. And thank you both for an interesting conversation. I think, Kevin, I finally understand crypto. Thank you for explaining it so clearly. We have many questions here, and I'll kick it off with Deval Shah says, this is a wonderful keynote. Thank you. You are into so many wonderful initiatives and companies currently. Can you please share your time management techniques and strategies and tactics? How do you prioritize? You have so many ideas and you're ready to work on, and time is obviously limited. How do you do that?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I think that the most important thing for time management is to build a great team. Because if an entrepreneur, if I had to do all the things that people probably imagine that I would do, I'd go crazy. There's just no way. And so the most important way that I manage my time is I make sure I hire, eventually great CEOs really to run a lot of things. And so it's kind of this crazy thing, but if I've realized that what I'm really good at over time is really thinking about some of these strategy and vision elements and helping to pull together people and capital and teams and relationships. And then if I can do that, to find a CEO that really can run it, then it amplifies and leverages my time incredibly well. From a kind of more tactical standpoint, I do really think about very set times during the day. So I sometimes break these, but in emergency situations or just really when things are really, really crazy. But I generally don't start my day until 9 a.m. So I try to say I don't take meetings before 9 a.m. because I really value my time in the morning to get up and I find it is some of the most creative time that I have. And so I don't structure it. I schedule free time in the morning so I can spend time with family. I can take a nice shower. I can do things that give me space and give me the ability to just think. And then I go pretty hard from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. and I'm generally back to back, all day, these days. But what I also do is I schedule a 1 hour lunch and I hold that sacred. And so I don't let anybody schedule over my lunch, again, to make sure that I don't burn myself out, throughout the day. And then I take a half hour break in the mid afternoon sometime. And so I end at 6. The only time I break that is if I'm doing a big project in Asia that requires me to work on Asia time. And so those times do get a little bit more stressful because I think confining my day to a very, by giving myself unstructured time and enough free time to think and to respond to email, in general, is really important. And so those are some of my tips for just how I handle time management.
Great, thank you. Another question from audience member Sunny Chen would like to know, how did you decide on which developing trends to invest in your entrepreneurial energy? How do you learn about these evolving fields while they are still in their infancy? And how did you find the CEOs so you can step back and play the chairman role?
Yeah, good question. I'm a little, I guess because I've been interested in software in particular for a long time, I think it's been a little bit easier for me to identify what is kind of a brand new technology, in the software space. And so there's an intersection of what is the new technology, and then ideally for me, again, this is not for everyone by any means, this is just what I look for. I look for the technology that enables a new business model. And a lot of times I'm not smart enough to figure that out. I'm not the one that pieces that together, but I'm pretty good at seeing the first instance of it and drawing that conclusion in the marketplace. And so when everyone's wondering, in even today, but certainly 4 or 5 years ago, when everyone was like, what is this crypto thing? It's so weird. Like, what is your revenue model? You know, the number one question people would ask of crypto entrepreneurs is, what is your revenue model? Like, how do you make money? And the answers from the crypto people are, we don't make money, or we don't make revenue. And that was weird, because what Bitcoin and Satoshi, pioneered, and Vitalik, drove it further, was that they would take a sliver of the founding, tokens that are necessary for the network to, for people to use and participate in the network. And they would take that sliver, and that would be it. They wouldn't charge any revenue over time. And they're, what Satoshi, when they created Bitcoin from nothing, and now they're worth whatever, $50,000 or something per Bitcoin, that is their reward, for creating Bitcoin. It's not, there's no company that drives, a revenue, from every transaction on Bitcoin. And so I in particular, and then what cloud computing enabled in 2 different ways, right? One in the gaming space was what we call free to play now, which is you play the game for free, you buy stuff, like Fortnite or League of Legends or any of these other games now, free to play business model. That can only happen in a cloud computing environment. The other thing that cloud computing drove for a lot of enterprise businesses was a freemium model, like Slack or others, or Dropbox, where you start using the product for free, and then you after some trial or some other thresholds are hit, you have to start paying, right, for those products. Those types of business models did not exist when you had on-prem software, or you had software that you had to put on a DVD and put into something. So part of it is really recognizing what is new in technology, what is a big enough game-changing technology, and then what are new business models that can emerge from that. And a lot of times, again, as I said, I'm not smart enough to actually take the new technology and figure out the new business model, but I'm pretty good at figuring out when somebody else starts to dabble and figure it out. And so I think with new fields, like, everyone can look at things like whether it's CRISPR, whether it's AI, generally speaking, or autonomous driving, or some of these, like, space exploration and frontier, or sustainable, like some of the new solar technologies that are coming out, and say, great, there's this new technologies evolving. I think the key to really thinking about some really interesting innovation that can happen is when you start seeing a new technology have a new business model. So it's not just, solar panels are a little 20% cheaper now. Okay, what can I do with that? That's hard to really drive a lot of new innovation. But it's, I can sell a solar panel to you and give it to you for free as a consumer, and then you lease it and you pay me back over time. And like things like that start to be really interesting, right? And so what I encourage is that new technologies and new business models, that intersection point is incredibly ripe for innovation and entrepreneurship. And it's hard for incumbents to compete when those 2 things come together. And it just means that also, entrepreneurship is an absolutely necessary ingredient when those 2 things come together. There's other ways to build incredible businesses, but that certainly is one of the richest veins. And I certainly don't know all the different. I'm not an expert on many technologies out there today, but for very specific technologies where I've been able to hone that. And every time that I've found a kind of new tech, new business model, it's just an explosion of opportunities and really important businesses being built out of that.
Great, thank you. The next question is from Ben Drake. He asks, I was wondering if you think it would ever be possible for national governments to see Bitcoin and other coins as a monetary replacement for traditional currency. How about large enterprises such as Amazon or Walmart?
Yeah, well, I do think that there's a lot of governments around the world who will start to use some form of cryptocurrency as there's plenty of governments around the world that are not called the United States or the UK or France, that they have they're just much smaller, and so the ability to transact with other nations in their own currency has always actually been out of their hands. And in some ways the U.S. has benefited from that greatly, being the reserve currency of the world. But I also think that increasingly, as we get into a digital, space, that it is becoming more and more possible, and we're starting to see it with some of the small island nations. I can't remember there's I think 2 that have now started to recognize a digital currency, another cryptocurrency, as sort of an official tender in their country, and so there's really interesting questions and things that we overlook here in the United States, of just how beneficial it is for us to be such a powerful nation and be at the center of innovation. I mean, a lot of countries don't have that. And so, the ability to buy oil, buy food, buy supplies from other countries. And if your currency is just not recognized as one of the things, you've got to go get US dollars, or you've got to get other things. And then even if you get US dollars, how do you even send it? How do you even pay somebody with it? If you're in a small island nation, so you're dependent on banks in other countries to actually hold custody and then settle in US dollars for you as an island nation. It's actually kind of it gets pretty crazy when you really think about exactly how do certain countries in the world pay for things. And so, I do think it is cryptocurrencies will become really important for certain countries in the world that have not traditionally participated in traditional financial systems, starting with some of these really small island nations and a few others. I think in terms of what enterprises would do, I don't know about that. I actually think enterprises will probably still use US dollars and other things. But having said that, I do think in this pandemic, you've seen United Airlines and American Airlines and a few others raise capital based on their loyalty reward system, right? If you Google United or was Delta for sure, they've raised capital and securitized it using their loyalty payments, their loyalty rewards. And so in essence, what being a United flyer, which I know a lot of us in the Bay Area are because of their hub here, we use it partly because of the mileage that we earn and the ability to use that mileage for a future flight and other benefits. And what is that mileage reward? Well, it's a point that sits on there's ultimately a database, right, where all those mileage rewards sit, and that's all sitting in United servers, and United can change them, wipe them, edit the rules around how you earn them or how you redeem them any time it wants. And so certain companies over time may choose to create their reward system based on a public blockchain to create more trust, in their program. So we'll see how that evolves. I don't think that's going to be a near-term thing, but I do think anytime a company or a nation or a financial institution is trying to create trust, I think they'll increasingly, as more education and knowledge comes out about what crypto actually is and what cryptocurrency or layer 1 blockchains provide the right trust and security models. But the whole point is, like, if I create a smart contract system that's based on Ethereum that houses my loyalty reward system, I'll never be able to change the rules on you, is basically the promise that a corporation can make at some point in time. And then they can say, hey, here's the open source version of the contracts that control these reward programs. And you can see that I can't go and raise billions of dollars on this and then inflate it away and devalue my loyalty reward system to you. These reward system points will always be worth, whatever the market determines them to be worth, and I can't change it as a corporation. So I think there's interesting promises and commitments like that are possible with public blockchains that enterprises can take advantage of, but I don't know if their entire business would sort of be dependent on a blockchain.
Thank you. The next question is from Rafael Granado. The question is, I've always been curious about the relation between crypto and energy consumption. Is it scalable? What's your opinion about this topic?
Yeah, I think, I think this is one of those headline things right now that it is real, but it's also sort of misunderstanding what the basic technology, is. And so what Bitcoin does, because Bitcoin was formed by somebody who is so wise and so smart and prescient that they decided that they would not make known who they are, because, and so nobody knows who Satoshi is, who she, he, they, whoever, is. And so Bitcoin was the original thing. And because there's no idea who the founder even is, there was no company running it. What that founder created is an incredibly well, I shouldn't say it. It's not the most energy efficient, way of doing what they do, but it's certainly a very secure way. And it's 11 years of being attacked by everyone and anyone, and it's withstood the test of time. The problem is, as Bitcoin value grows, and it goes from being worth a fraction of a penny to $1 to $10 to $10,000 to $100,000, there's an economic incentive for more and more people to add just not required hardware and processing power to Bitcoin to protect Bitcoin. And it's how the incentives work. Every 10 minutes is a new Bitcoin. Right now, 6.25 Bitcoin being mined. And so there's always an economic incentive to add more hardware, even though it's not really necessary probably anymore. And unfortunately, because there's no corporation, there's no founder of Bitcoin, it will always be like that. It's not clear it'll ever change. And there's good things and bad things, about that. With Ethereum and certainly a number of the new blockchain technologies, we're kind of entering our third generation of blockchain technology. They're much more energy efficient. And so this problem of proof of work and what Bitcoin has created is already solving itself. There's no point in having that much electricity and hash power for blockchains. It's just not necessary. And so the newer generation of stuff is all much better already. But the headlines always kind of, what happened, what Bitcoin does rubs its, because it's such a flagship for the entire industry, will always cast this pall over the rest of the crypto industry. So things like, minting an NFT or whatever, oh my gosh, it's so bad for the environment. It's really not that true. But it gets a lot of the bad rap from Bitcoin. And of course, to be fair, Ethereum today is also proof of work because it comes from Bitcoin, but it's already, Ethereum 2 is already, starting to make headway. So anyway, that's it's a hard problem. Bitcoin itself is the problem, and it's not clear how to fix that because there's no company. So the market dynamics probably will, because countries and new technologies will emerge. I think that take the core of Bitcoin and it'll just become more. It won't be economically efficient to just continue sucking up the amount of electricity that it's doing. So I think there's a lot of important work being done to replace that. But it is a mistake, I think, to cast the entire crypto industry into this like really bad eco economy thing. It's just not what the foundation of the technology is actually about.
Great. Well, we have so many questions in the chat and the Q&A function. I think we'll just have time for one more, and then I'm going to ask Steve to wrap this up and then turn it back to me to move us to the next phase of the morning. But the final question, Kevin, for you is from an audience member who's curious to hear your thoughts on diversity in the entrepreneurship world and what steps we could take to further improve the status quo.
Yeah, I think this is something that I really I've wanted to take a little bit more active part in. And so I think it does start with ensuring that more investors are diverse, is there is study after study has shown that the linkage between investors that are diverse and more diverse entrepreneurs that come out, from that is real. And so I do think that when the primary investor ecosystem in the past has been primarily in Silicon Valley, but I do think that's actually exploding with remote work and technologies all throughout the world, which I love. But I think number one, it's ensuring that there's more diversity in investors, and I think that one of the most important ways for that to happen is that LPs, of which I am for new funds, that new funds trying to get created have LPs that are willing to take a bet on a diverse team of investors forming a fund for the first time. So I think that is one of the probably most helpful ways, and it'll take, it is changing. There's recognition. There's, I think, reasonable recognition, of that we need to make sure that we help new fund managers, new VCs get started that come from that are diverse, and that LPs can actually do a lot by making sure we back, first-time fund managers that are diverse. And then the second thing I think is for entrepreneurs to help each other, in terms of understanding networks, and so certainly mentoring new generations of entrepreneurs, especially ones that are diverse, I think is kind of an important responsibility for a lot of folks who've had some measure of success in this space. And I think also in the last couple of years, we've certainly made some good progress there, but also in terms of recognition that that's important. Long way to go, still. But from my perspective, not being as young as I once was, in having seen things for about a 2 decade long period, I know there's young folks who feel like, oh man, we're just not changing fast enough. But in my perspective, I think some of more understanding of fundamental root cause, more real discussions of change, and then more change actually happening. It's just starting, and to me, it's all about velocity and momentum, as opposed to always looking at the absolute number. And yeah, we have a ton of work to do it. But I think existing entrepreneurs really making it a priority to mentor and help introduce new entrepreneurs to the right, both investors and other co-founders and other things is really important. Mentor that, make sure that we all fund and help new investor, first-time fund managers that come from a diverse background. These are probably 2 of the most important things that can happen to move the needle. And I hope we all do our part to do more in these important aspects.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Steve, what final word from you, my friend?
Kevin, thank you so much. I learned so much, both professionally and personally, every time we have a chance to get together. And thank you for being so unselfish and giving of your time to the university. You and Connie are so devoted to making sure the world changes and is a better place. And it's seen, and it's so rare that 2 individuals under the age of 40, as Adina said, it makes such a significant contribution. So thank you. Really appreciate it. And on behalf of the school, again, thanks for always being there when we pick up the phone, text, and email. For a gentleman that works 9 to 6, I'm surprised I get responses to my text and emails from you. So thank you so much. Thank you for your wisdom. You're an unbelievable entrepreneur, unbelievable individual with so much knowledge. But I learned more today about personal life, of where I need to focus my attention, not only on a time management, but about open code and making sure the world is a free place for a lot larger population, and your mission and goals could be seen. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you, Steve. And thank you, Kevin, very, very much. It was a wonderful.
Just lastly, Steve, thank you so much. being a student of yours 20 plus years ago to today, just kind of seeing your devotion to Cal, and anytime you ask me to do anything, how could I not, be a part of it? So thank you so much for everything that you do. And thanks for your time today too.
That's right. Thank you. And Anne, thanks for kicking us off this morning with a great update. Really appreciate that. And thank you all.